Hey, this is Sky. Welcome to my YouTube channel. It's Monday, Mafia Monday. Get yourself in the mood. Mr. Snubby is in the mood. He wants to kill somebody. I think we got a murder planned. So let's jump into it. Chapter 10, Mafia Monday. We're going scene by scene through all 3 books that I wrote about the Los Angeles Syndicate. This first book is California Gangsters. We're just starting chapter 10. It's called My First Company Job. Our main character, Simon Castro, is trying to make his bones with the syndicate. He's currently a member. He just got made into the Los Angeles crime family, into the mafia. And he wants to graduate up the ladder. But he has to do a job first. So let's get into it and see how this goes. I don't really know how long this scene will be, but it may be a little longer than the last video. So we'll just find a healthy place to stop and see how this works out. Set your mood right. Chapter 10. I sat around all weekend thinking about how to find the Chinese triad boss. I had to get out of the apartment for some fresh air, so I drove down to the ghetto and talked to some Mexican street gangs. I wanted to see if they knew anything about the triads. Frank had taught me that the street gangs were often the best way to find out information on people. They were huge gossips, like old ladies at a card game. The street corner gangsters were often a great underground source of news, rumors, and conspiracies. Besides, I needed some food, and the barrio was the best place to get it. The rule in Los Angeles has always been, the worse the neighborhood, the better the tacos. I had a pal from high school named Carlos Mendoza. He ended up in the Mexican mafia. We were only classmates for a year, and then he transferred to a school across town, deep in La MA turf. We both made the varsity football team and received our Letterman jackets on the same day. I liked Carlos because we had a history together, and we could relate to one another. We were both just a couple of dumb jocks who became LA gangsters by accident. We had kept in touch over the years. I must have run into Carlos, at least 5 times at random places. Once at the Glendale Galleria and another time down on Rodeo Drive shopping. I don't believe in coincidences. I think I kept in touch with Carlos simply because the universe or God had demanded it. I met Carlos at a small traditional Mexican restaurant downtown near Olivera Street for some food. The place could only fit a few customers at one time, with very limited seating, making the service intimate and personal. The second I opened the door, my mouth began to water from the aroma of the good cooking. There were only 4 tables and a long counter to sit at. Carlos had a giant table of food spread out that he had already ordered before I arrived. My timing was perfect as usual, as I could have eaten a horse. I was starving. When I walked in, ducking my head through the small doorway, Carlos stood up and gave me a hug. He asked me, "Mi amigo, ¿qué pasó?" We both sat down. I wasted no time putting a napkin in my shirt, ready to eat. I replied, "Man, it's good to see you. The food looks amazing. Hey, I need some help from you, homie." Carlos looked at me eagerly and said, "I'm always here to help you, amigo. Me and you, we go way back. Since 9th grade, right? Before you had that long horse mane that you call hair. Remember? We were greasers back in those days, and you were always in the mirror with that plastic comb." I laughed and replied, "Yes, that's right, 9th grade. Those were the good old days for sure. Hey, I'm looking for this Chinese guy named Jin Chang. He's a triad boss. Have you ever heard of him? You got any idea where I can find him?" We both began filling our plates with samples of all the various food on the table. Without hesitation, we began devouring the cuisine like hungry dogs, gulping down mouthfuls without chewing more than once or twice. With a full mouth of food, Carlos said, "Oh, you mean that new fucking guy they brought in from Hong Kong? He's here to kick some ass and keep his organization in line. Those guys have been making all sorts of moves lately." I replied, "Wait a minute. You know who he is?" Carlos took a drink of his horchata and said, "In this business, it pays to know everything, amigo. Your triad boss got here only about a month ago. Everyone over in Chinatown is talking about him being a real dickhead, but nobody would say anything to his face because he'd have them killed and probably their whole family too. I laughed and replied, well, can you find out where he hangs out for me? Carlos stopped eating for a second, looked around, and leaned in towards me real close. He said with a sly smile and a gleam in his eyes, oh, you're going to kill him, aren't you? That's so fucking cool, man. Hey, Simon, I want to come with you. I replied, well, find him first. Then I'll decide if I need any help. You know how the old saying goes, too many cooks spoil the stew. Carlos always had quick comebacks and replied, well, that's true, amigo, but the Beatles said you only get by with a little help from your friends. Carlos stood up and looked out of the doorway down the block to his fellow gang members, who were lurking around on the sidewalk out front, patiently waiting for him. He yelled, Oye, ¿dónde está Manuel? One of his street soldiers replied, I will go and get him for you, un momento. The two of us sat in the tiny restaurant alone, eating plate after plate of the most awesome Mexican food in town. When we were both full to our gills, we sat back in our chairs and Carlos lit up a blunt to settle our swollen stomachs. Finally, his young cousin Manuel, a 16-year-old teenager, came riding up on his bicycle. He laid the Schwinn beach cruiser down in the dirt next to the building and came strolling in, sucking on a lollipop. Carlos stood up and took his cousin firmly by the arm into the corner of the dining room. They spoke together quietly in Spanish, and then Manuel was off again on his bicycle, racing down the block as fast as he could pedal his little Chuck Taylors. Carlos sat down next to me at the table as the waitress cleared the plates away. He said, hey, you doing anything for the next half hour or so? Manuel will find out where Jin Chang is right now. You can do the job tonight. I was a little surprised at how fast everything was moving. I was only there for some intelligence on this guy. I hate pulling a trigger without a solid plan formed. I replied, wow, your cousin is really going to find Jin Chang right now? Carlos replied, si, senor. Just sit tight. Nobody hides from us. After about 35 minutes, and 2 joints later, Manuel came riding up the block doing wheelies on his bicycle. He tossed his beach cruiser in the bushes, gave the guys out front the neighborhood handshake, and then strolled in the restaurant like he owned the place. He came over to Carlos excited and spoke very fast in Spanish. Carlos looked at me and said, okay, Simon, we got him. The old man is at a card game right now in a well-known gambling room not far from here, over in Chinatown. I paid the tab at the restaurant, leaving a huge tip, and thanked the owners for the meal. We went out to my car, a white 4-door Cadillac that was on loan from my Uncle Frank. Carlos got in the passenger seat next to me. Manuel and the 2 gang members who were waiting out front jumped in the back seat. With a car full of cholos, we went to gather some intelligence on my target. We drove for several blocks over to Chinatown, making left and right turns as Uncle Frank always liked me to do for my own safety. We finally reached a small urban residential block with a row of apartments on both sides and a few small stores peppered in between them. Carlos said, if you are wrong about this, Manuel, we're going to cut off your feet. Manuel's eyes went as wide as my headlights, and he replied defiantly, no way, man. I need these feet. He's sitting near the front door, I promise. Don't take my feet. I was skeptical and said, he's sitting by the door, a triad boss. I don't know, kid. Manuel snapped back at me. The Chinese don't hide in back rooms like you Italians do. Carlos turned around and put his finger in his cousin's face and said, watch how you talk to Simon. He's a Castro. You know what that means? Manuel was shaken and replied in a timid voice, no. With flared nostrils and a mean scowl, Carlos said, it means you have to show some respect, dummy. This is the future Don of L.A. I said, okay, guys, here we are. Let's see if this is for real or not. I'm a little skeptical. I had an old photo of Jin Chang from a clipping in a Chinese newspaper. We drove by the small Chinese gambling den in stealth mode, with the tinted windows up. Out front, there were several men standing around wearing black tight business suits. Exactly as Manuel had told us, there was 2 old Chinese men sitting at a table near the doorway. One of them was indeed the same man in the photo that I had, the same man that I was ordered to kill. I took a long look at the old man, who was deeply involved in his game with his friend. Both men were animated and arguing about something that had just occurred on the table. As we rolled by slowly, I said to Carlos, "Okay, man, I've seen what I need to in order to do this hit. I'll be watching this location all week, waiting for the perfect opportunity." Carlos looked puzzled at me and replied, "Amigo, he is there right now. Look at him. He's ready to die. Can't you smell death in the air? This is the time to do it. Kill him now." I laughed and said, "No, I can't just drive by in the middle of the street. This is not a LA family hit. This is orders directly from the board of directors. This is a syndicate hit. I have to do this right." Carlos replied softly as he leaned in towards me, "The company told you to do this? Well then, you have no option. We must do it right now. We must, Simon. It has to happen now." I slowly pulled forward and said, "Look, Carlos, I do this shit all the time. I kill people for a living. This is a high-value target. I thank you for finding him, but I need to set this up and do it right." Carlos smiled and replied, "Okay, amigo, okay." He grabbed a roach clip from my ashtray and lit it up with a Zippo lighter. Carlos took a long toke and passed it back to his cousin. He said something to Manuel in Spanish, and Manuel said back in English, "Yes, boss." Carlos turned and said to me, "Maybe you should pull around the block one more time and get a second look at things, you know? Only if you want to. If you think you have seen enough, we can go back over to the barrio. I know a good party that we can go to." I shrugged my shoulders and nodded in agreement. It would be good to get a second glance at the building, the entrances, the exits, and to see what was directly across the street. I figured that I would come back a few times during the week to scope the block out for the perfect sniper shot from a hidden location. I circled the short block. The gambling den was in the middle of the street. As the light turned green and we prepared to make our second pass on the den, in the shadows of the back seat, Manuel slowly and secretly took a pistol from one of the other gang members. As I drove up the block, he suddenly popped open the back door and jumped out. Manuel was running as fast as he could down the street with a pistol in his hand. Noticing what was going on, I freaked out. I yelled out of my window as I drove alongside the teenager. I said, "You're going to get us killed. Get back in the car right now." Then I looked at Carlos and said in a worried tone, "What the fuck is going on, man?" Carlos replied, "Don't worry, amigo. He is becoming a man right now. Just drive up the block. Be ready to pull away as fast as you can." I said, "No, you're fucking everything up, Carlos. This is not how we do things. You have to stop him now. Tell him to stop." Carlos shook his head and smiled. He said, "It's too late, Ese." Right at that moment, 2 gunshots rang out. Bang! Bang! I was out front of the Triad gambling den. Manuel came running out with the pistol clutched in his hand and a huge grin on his face, proudly showing his missing front tooth. The back door of the car swung open, and he jumped inside, panting and laughing. Manuel yelled, "I did it! I did it!" I looked over to the gambling den and saw Jin Chang's limp body on the floor in the doorway, with blood coming out of his head and forming a large pool. Jin Chang was dead. I gave Carlos a mean sneer, hit the gas, and sped off into the busy streets of Chinatown to escape the scene before the cops showed up. We turned the corner and were out of sight. We were lost in traffic. I stopped at the next light. 2 cop cars sped by us in the other direction with their lights and sirens blaring. I looked back through my rearview mirror and asked Manuel, "Where did you shoot him?" The kid spoke in broken English and replied to me, "La cabeza. In the head. La cabeza." There was blood everywhere. He handed his gun to Carlos, still shaking with excitement. We took turn after turn, making sure nobody followed us, and ended up back out front of the small Mexican restaurant on the other side of downtown, where we started our journey. I parked out front, and some of the gang members were still lurking around on the block. A few of them slowly wandered over to Carlos, and the guys got out of the car. I told Carlos, "You guys lay low. The triad will be all over the barrio." Carlos replied, "Don't worry about us down here. The Chinese will be killed if they cross Broadway. We will be waiting for them." I said, "All right, I'll be in touch. I'll give you some cash for the hit." Carlos smiled and replied, "I don't want any of your money for this one. I only want one thing from you, my friend." And I said, "What's that?" And Carlos replied, "I want to be part of your new mob." What did he call it? The DTGs. "I want to be a downtown gangster with you guys. I know I'm not Italian." I was puzzled and said, "Who told you about this? My new crew is a secret. Not even my uncle knows." Carlos laughed and replied, "I know Mika. I've known Mika for a long time. He used to buy all his steroids for me back when he was a competitive bodybuilder. He said he wanted to ask you first, but I've known you longer than I've known him, so what's up? Can I be a part of DTG?" I laughed and said, "Yes, of course, as long as you're allowed to be a part of my crew. I know that you already have ties to La M." Carlos replied, "M wants me to join with you. They want the alliance. DTG is going to be the biggest mob in LA." All right, well, let's stop here. Thanks for watching.